back for episode 11. I love that intro with our two heads bobbing in the car. Where are you at right now, Chandler?
Yeah, Justin, I'm in Paris. It's a week after ETC, which is a weird thing to say, but last week, for any of the viewers that were kind of interested, Justin and I were in Washington, D.C. for our company offsite. It was great. We got to jam with the team. And as a result, I was very keen to join ETC, but then never got to because I got to hang out with my team, and I decided to hang out in Paris for a little while. So I'm here for the rest of this week, and we'll be hanging out in Paris. So if you see a different background, I'm sure I'm the one that changes the background the most, but I'm in a WeWork randomly in Paris. It's quite beautiful. I'm actually, side note, that this WeWork that I'm at specifically, the MetaMask team have decided to have their company offsite in Paris as well. And they had a little power hour earlier today. And so we were hanging out with I was hanging out with the MetaMask team earlier, just chatting about what they've been up to recently. And it's been pretty cool.
Any alpha that you can leak? Is there a mask token coming out
soon? No, they wouldn't tell some scrub like me what they're up to. It was just more around just what are they thinking about from a strategic perspective? How can they make user onboarding a bit easier? How can they make the branding around MetaMask a bit more front and center in people's mind? And also just basically, if we're quite honest, MetaMask has been the number one onboarding experience for almost everyone in Web3. And how do they take that market position and make it so that they can onboard the next 100 million as opposed to the next 10 million? And they've been thinking about that quite deeply.
Real problems.
Yeah.
So yeah, the offsite was amazing. Let me just share this picture of the team. Hopefully that comes out well. That's all of us in front of the Capitol. Unfortunately, we didn't get to meet with any Congress people or senators about crypto policy, but we just had a great time.
We tried, though. We did try.
We tried. Yeah, I called a bunch of congressmen and women, and no luck. But we got a nice tour of the Capitol building. So we had a blast. I'm in Chicago right now, Chandler. So I'm on the way back to Los Angeles, which is home for me. And just here till tomorrow, actually.
Yeah. Speaking of the Capitol building, I've got to ask the question. I'm not American, so this is kind of fascinating to me. Are there actual aliens in America right now? I mean, I know the movies tell us that they always come to America as the first port of call, but is that actually the case that's happening?
Yeah, I think you're referencing the congressional hearing yesterday, which is sort of mind-blowing, right? So a senior U.S. intelligence official testified in front of Congress saying that he was in charge of investigating what they called the UAP program, which is the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Program. He was in charge of researching if that was real, trying to determine if that's in some parts of government or with our contractors. And he determined it was real. And he was so concerned by it that he reported it as a whistleblower to the Chief Inspector General of the Intelligence Committee, from my understanding. And the report was deemed to be credible. He's talked a lot to the media. A lot of what he has to share in the documents he can't share yet because they're classified and he could go to jail. But yesterday he testified to Congress and committed to Congress that in a SCIF, which is a secure classified communications room, that he would share those documents. So pretty wild. We'll see what happens. I would do anything to know the truth. I mean, there's certainly footage out there of crazy objects flying around that defy our current understanding of how things work. And that's a fact. I mean, who knows what it is, though? But I would do anything to know.
Artificial intelligence has been on the rise of late, and tied to one of the topics that we're going to be speaking about later today around Worldcoin. There's a lot of these evidence-based elements that are coming out, which is kind of interesting. But the thing that I'm kind of excited about is we've got superconductors, we've got aliens, and we've got generalized human proof of identity. So for the first time, I think crypto in itself isn't the craziest bit of news that's happening in the world at the moment. And so I think our podcast for today, as great as it's going to be, and the kind of interesting topics that are very topical to us right now, I think the world has in this very last week become a far more colorful area than I ever expected to be.
Yeah, we were joking at our daily stand-up call that first you got to pivot from crypto to AI, and then you have to pivot from AI to superconductors. We'll talk about that in a second. And then right after the superconductor news, like hypothesis blew up, now we have the alien info. So it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be alive. Technology is amazing. I mean, I feel so lucky that we're like part of this generation where like things that we didn't think were possible. So I mean, the superconductor stuff is eating up the majority of our Astaria chat history. So everyone on the team is super interested in this idea that superconductors at room temperature can exist. I'm sure you guys have seen the news. It's pretty wild. We'll see if it can be replicated. But interesting times to be alive, that's for sure. And yeah, to your point, it's nice to see that crypto's not in the tech headlines just for a little bit.
With all this news, let's dive into exactly what we wanted to chat about today. More topical to our industry.
Definitely. So first up, and I know you had a lot you wanted to cover on this, but this is Paradigm's paper on intent-based architectures that will transition a little bit into the UniswapX discussion. So why don't you give us a high-level overview, Chandler? What's happening? Before you dive into that, just one quick thing I noticed that I wanted to point out. Pretty crazy. So you see the crypto banner up top going back and forth on the Paradigm website. Super funny to me. A couple weeks ago, they pivoted to crypto plus AI. And there was a lot of backlash that they were like abandoning crypto and just doing like the classic VC thing of like following the next hot ball. I just thought it was super funny. They now have this crypto banner to cover up that PR. But didn't mean to cut you off on the academic stuff, Chandler. I'll let you take it over.
Be sure to know that we will cover when they turn to superconductors and aliens. When that banner changes, we'll let you know. But intent-based, intent-based architecture. So what is the whole hype around that? Very simply, normal transactions that you would submit on Ethereum, the ones that we would sign with our MetaMask transaction or your Ledger transaction or whatever like interface that you use right now, are very deterministic. They're very specific set of rules that you have to submit to the EVM to be able to execute those transactions. And that's a great like system to use, but there are a couple like considerations that you have to think about when thinking about these types of transactions. One is that you have to like give up everything right up at the front in terms of how this transaction needs to be processed. And developers develop contracts in the same way to be able to say, okay, if I'm going to swap from one asset to the other, I need all that information up front. The code gets executed and like transacted, and then at the end of the day you get your outcome based on what you submitted, right? The most interesting part about that design dynamic is a concept that I think everyone on this call should have heard of before, but have at least encountered once or twice, is the concept of MEV. So Justin, if you tell me that you want to swap X amount of ETH for USDC and you submit that into the mempool, I, as the person that's going to be able to like execute that transaction, i.e. the block builder or the person that's actually going to be creating that like computation that ultimately gives you the result that you want, can see that and then change the game in the way that would benefit me. But at the end of the day, for the average user, that's actually what MEV is. Like you can extract everything that's not exactly what you've given based on what the market is saying is the outcome versus what you've deterministically given to me. As Justin has brought up the screen here, you can see that the latest version of Uniswap is actually building towards this direction where you can actually deterministically give your intention, and there is a new way to execute Uniswap transactions. The most amazing part about this whole concept is two things. One is that these transactions can be executed throughout any of the versions of Uniswap. So it's whether it's the upcoming V4, V3, or V1 and 2, you can execute these transactions through UniswapX protocol kind of immediately. But here's the kicker. Uniswap don't really care where the best execution happens, because you can then now take UniswapX and execute that on a different DEX that's not actually Uniswap. And so Uniswap don't really care about where the best execution sits, whether they want it to be Uniswap, but they can also plug into the entire ecosystem. And so UniswapX is this like front end that abstracts all the complexity away. And so the user just says, I want this outcome to happen, and therefore it does.
So do you think this is like a could be a replacement for aggregators. I mean, I know people are loyal to CowSwap, but every time I've gotten a quote on CowSwap and compared it to 1inch, I've always gotten better pricing on 1inch. Do you think this UniswapX will just be a tier above? What are your thoughts there?
So yes, I do, for one reason and one reason only. The actual intent-based architecture that any of these other platforms like 1inch and CowSwap have implemented are determined by the markers that they can facilitate. And so while their tech is the same, that probably in many respects, and actually for the way that users will end up interacting with them, the tech's very much the same. Where Uniswap have a distinct advantage is the fact that they own a decent portion of the liquidity and the trading volume. So as much as CowSwap want to compete with Uniswap have this commanding position within the ecosystem, and UniswapX, I think, is Uniswap's way of saying we are going to be the same aggregator as everyone, and will execute transactions because it's an intent-based system. Uniswap don't control how these intents get executed, right?
Yeah.
Because somebody needs to execute it on the behalf of Uniswap, and they'll work with partners to do that. But it's to say, okay, well, many of these other platforms might bias in one way, shape, or the other, and Uniswap could also have that. But at the end of the day, like, if Uniswap's X's transactions are on aggregate better than the others, then they will always be more beneficial.
Yeah.
And so this validates CowSwap's idea fundamentally, but it kind of also alleviates the fact that CowSwap could have never gotten as much liquidity as Uniswap did. One area that I think is extremely important to raise in the same breath of saying these are valuable like design choices is two areas. One is, where do these intent messages actually sit? Where do these, like, you're going to sign this transaction, and where's that actually going to happen? Where's that message going to be like aggregated to? It's not actually within protocol, it's out of protocol most of the time. And the concern is that these protocol aggregate, or these intent-based aggregation messages will sit in centralized pools. And so there's a huge centralization factor that is of concern. And the other concern is that, like, all right, so intents really help with like MEV extraction and being able to like mitigate against that. But then when intents becomes valuable, what stops MEV actors from sitting on top of the intents layer? And so it's like it's a bit of a chicken and egg kind of problem at the end of the day. And so
I've been thinking about this too, because like if you submit your transaction to Flashbots, right, and you want to, like, they have this MEV protection relayer, and you can submit your transaction there, but like people can actually look at that pool as well, right? So it's interesting. Like, is this even a solvable problem? But yeah, it's a whole can of worms. Definitely fascinating.
Yeah. So my TLDR here is intents is a new paradigm to play around with a different set of transaction types that I think will really tie into the cross-chain ecosystem quite neatly and quite sophisticatedly. And I think a lot of the bridging infrastructure that exists right now will migrate themselves to being able to support intent-based messaging. And with the whole concept of account abstraction, these three things I think will tie into unlocking a lot of just like ease of use for users.
Cool. So for the next topic, obviously the big news of the week, I would say the major news, is Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, which created ChatGPT, which is like one of the fastest growing applications in the world, just launched Worldcoin. So the orbs were out there previously, right? They've been scanning eyeballs, I think, for a couple of years now, and now they just launched their token this week. And so they airdropped it to people that had scanned their eyeballs before. But the controversy here is that the vast majority of the token supply went to market makers and insiders who are, of course, still locked up. But it's one of these Solana-style, very low-float tokens where like a very small, teeny tiny portion of the circulating supply is actually there, and the rest is just locked up. And so you get these like outlandish valuations. I think WorldCoin is valued at like $23 to $25 billion right now, and they haven't really built much, right? They've just scanned a lot of eyeballs. And just to highlight this, you could see circulating supply at launch is only 143 million WorldCoin. I believe the total fully diluted supply is 10 billion. And so 43 million world coins were airdropped to people that scan their eyeballs, but not US persons. And then 100 million were loaned to non-US market makers. So $111 airdrop and a $260 million to market makers. And you can see here that market makers controlled 95% of the float at launch, which means, right, that they're like basically just buying and selling from each other and controlling the pricing information there. So, the idea that I like really want to focus on is, do scammy tokenomics make the project scammy, or do you have to separate the tokenomics from the project? Like, is there something real there? Is there a there, or is this just a way for Sam Altman to have a really awesome exit, right? Because this is a $23 billion project, and I'm sure he has a lot of tokens.
I think Sam Altman is a billionaire in his own right. Yes, he might claim he doesn't have funds in OpenAI, but the man's a genius, and anyone that would ever want to back him will give him everything that he wants. I don't think it's an exit. That's what I think is important. What I do think is that, is this token worth exactly what its fully diluted value is? No, not right now. Do I think Worldcoin as a concept is interesting? Somewhat contentious. So let me break that down very quickly. One, I think Sam Altman as an AI creator is very concerned around one particular problem, and that's the concept around is this actor that's happening online an AI or a person? And that is actually kind of important for just the general safety. It's the fundamental question that most AI researchers, safety researchers, think about right now. There's a plethora of other things to think about, but that's actually the thing. And so Worldcoin is an attempt to solve that particular problem. So what does Worldcoin do? Well, they scan your iris in terms of figuring out what your identity is. The interesting part around the tech around that is they take a photo of your eye, they hash that, they delete the photo, and then they just keep that stored data. So it's like this concept of and they don't ask for any of your personal information. So there's no Justin Brand, there's no social security, there's no concept of a nation state. There's just this hash that this individual with this eyeball exists, and it's just a positive recollection. And so it's a way to prove authenticity online without actually having to give any information out. So I think the Worldcoin people, from a privacy preserving perspective, have thought about it quite deeply on how to actually scan the eyeball. Would I scan my eyeball? Absolutely not.
Really? Why not?
They need a lot more time to prove why this is valuable. And I think
you have an iPhone, right?
Yes, and that's exactly the next point that I was. Yeah. And that's exactly the next point. I'm comfortable having my face unlock my phone locally, but I'm not comfortable with the concept of what Worldcoin are doing. And I think that fundamentally a branding position and a value proposition. And I think Worldcoin actually acts as a deterrent to the overall genuine value of what's happening. Right? People unlock their iPhone because it was useful. It was valuable.
They're giving you $50 a month to scan your eyeball. That's what the Worldcoin token emissions are. I think I'm getting mine scanned tomorrow. Actually, fun fact.
But how does that scale to millions and billions of people? Right? At the end of the day, this token cannot inflate indefinitely. And if we're gonna have a general UBI, I think that's a very different topic to human identity and provable human identity. There are so many ways to prove human identity. There's KYC, there's the government system, there's what Worldcoin are trying to innovate on, and I fully appreciate the innovation that's happening. I just don't think that the token being introduced right now adds to their value proposition. I think it takes away from it.
So you would have rather they waited to launch the token? That's your only gripe, basically?
Yeah, I think right now the world really dislikes tokens, and I think that the world right now really wants to find that value proposition for crypto. And so I think that the concept of what Worldcoin are right now is the MySpace to what social media is.
But you see, the world is in love with Sam Altman, right? Like crypto was the savior in 2021. Now Sam Altman with AI is the savior. Like, don't you think this lends credibility to our space, or do you think this is just a train wreck that's going to be another stain on the industry?
It just feels a bit disjointed to me.
We'll see. I don't know. I mean, they have the resources to do something. We'll see.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I mean, you shared this with me earlier. This is interesting footage of people lining up to scan. Obviously, because you're basically getting paid to get scanned, right? So you get that $50 a month. I think they're going to have like a lot of adoption, quote unquote, in the sense that people will be scanning. And I don't fundamentally understand like what the Worldcoin OP chain does or what the point of the token is. Like, I agree with all of your points there. But there is something to be said about on-chain identity. I've read Vitalik's post. People should read it. It is a little long and dense, so maybe not. But yeah, I don't think this solves it. But it is, for me, it's nice to see that Sam Altman, who's like the poster child of tech and what the media loves, like launching a token, right? Because I think it's good for people to see the narrative that like crypto isn't dead and there's something here. But it's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, the value transfer to people, I think, will always be an appealing use case. But here's an interesting like dichotomy, right? If you pulled up your national identity card, you're an American. I am not. I
We
pull
don't
up my
have such a
national
thing.
driver's license. Passport.
In the US, there's like been a huge push against national ID cards. So you don't have, I have a driver's license, passport, of course, but there's no like ID card, a national ID card, which is common with other nations.
Yeah, but this concept of like this document proves your identity, and you can go to a nightclub and they check your age for that. You can go to a border security professional and they can like stamp you in and out. Ultimately, there's this concept of like, okay, in the physical world, these identity documents need to be there to make sure that there is some level of understanding of where people are moving. Information is a combination of like machine created information and human created information. And so how do you actually solve the problem of understanding what is human and what is not? And in the world of like AI, deepfakes is a big concern. The idea of being able to like copyright somebody's information is a deep concern. So how do you prove human authenticity online? And I think that's where I think Worldcoin needs to focus on, and not the random tokenomics. Tokenomics can come later. Do your UBI system when it makes sense. But right now, I
Maybe they
think
need the capital. I mean, or maybe this is the engine to get people to like. I'm scanning my eyes tomorrow. Maybe this is the engine they need to incentivize it. Maybe the tokenomics are actually very smart because they're keeping the price high and the monthly income high to the people they're trying to give UBI to. So I don't know. I'm partially playing devil's advocate here. I think there's something there. I don't think this is just a total scam.
Can I ask you one favor? As a good friend of mine and somebody that I really enjoy your opinion of, please let me know how that experience goes. And if you leave there as telling me it's Orwellian, that'll be great. If you tell me that it was totally fine and chilled, that's also all right.
I'll try to take some pictures.
Yeah, I'm very keen to know what that experience is like. There's very little that you can get from those videos that are of online of like how it looks and feels. But like, I'm very keen for your opinion.
Yeah, I'll for the next podcast, hopefully I'll have some pictures and share my experience. But if you're in the US, I think they have locations in New York, LA, Miami, maybe a couple others, and then internationally, I think they have several locations as well. But what I was saying is there are like impacts on the Ethereum ecosystem. So Worldcoin is built on optimism. So they're building Worldcoin has their own OP chain. And you can see here the news that with all of this, who knows if this is sticky, right? But with all of these Worldcoin token claims and transactions, optimism now has leapfrogged Arbitrum in the highest amount of daily transactions. And this is something I've been kind of thinking about for a while. So Worldcoin's building on optimism. Coinbase's base layer 2 is building on optimism. We're seeing a lot of like the quote unquote like DeFi 1.0 / smarter maybe projects building on optimism. Like everyone is building on optimism, and Arbitrum just sort of like houses, I don't want to say the Ponzi's, but like the projects like GMX and the GMX forks, and they're like valuable and fun, and that's great. But like it seems to me like the mind share is headed towards optimism. but the market's not reflecting that. So like me personally, I've been looking at the OP token. I don't own any right now. I don't own any layer 2 tokens, but if I were to pick one, I would pick Optimism over Arbitrum because right now it's valued less, and it seems like the activity and mind share is moving to Optimism. Any quick thoughts there, Chandler, before we sign off?
Yeah, you've asked me if I dumped any of my initial layer 2 tokens that I got
Yeah.
airdropped. I never did, and I still haven't. And so I totally
Are
agree
they
with your
up
concept.
since the airdrop?
I wish I knew. I don't check this stuff.
That's how you know you've made it, when you don't even know if you're up or down on your tokens.
My favorite part though is that um, all the trading that's happening on the Worldcoin token is like kind of done this trajectory. But what's kind of interesting here is more of a lower level value accrual that Optimism have accrued is they built the OP stack. Coinbase is building on the OP stack. The base chain is actually going to be an OP stack chain. And then, while the token itself of WorldCoin is on OP, the WorldCoin team have publicly committed to building out their own like layer 3 on the OP stack.
Yeah,
and so
super cool.
I think I totally agree with your like dichotomy of like arbitrum optimism that's happening right now. And like, there's always going to be these competitions of like, where do you get an advantage? Optimism have kind of got this like, deeper developer long-term view. I don't think Arbitrum right now is short-term by any stretch of the imagination, but I definitely think that they need to like have their step forward. And I love this like, push and pull that's happening,
great.
because
It's
at
nice
the
to
end
have
of the
two
day,
competing.
yes, exactly. And that is beautiful.
Yeah. I also don't think that these optimistic rollups will get leapfrogged by ZK rollups. Like I remember 2 years ago in late 2021, I was interviewing someone from Starkware on my YouTube channel, and he was saying like Starkware is going to be out like live in 2 weeks, that anyone can use it. And I just don't think we're there yet. I mean, I know Polygon has launched their ZK era, but from my understanding, like these ZK rollups will be where optimistic rollups were last cycle, where like I remember Arbitrum launched, Optimism launched, and you could like use Uniswap, but things were very limited. Like there was Uniswap deployed, and that was kind of it. And there were like really big limitations. So if we are on this like normal cycle, I think optimistic rollups steal the show for, quote unquote, this cycle. And then as that's winding down, like we start to see the ZK solutions pop off. But we'll see what happens. I think there's, especially with 4844, I think there's a place for optimistic rollups. So I would definitely look to have some optimism exposure before the end of the year if I can, if it makes sense. So yeah.
One last thought. I totally agree with your thoughts on optimistic rollups not being superseded by ZK rollups. For one reason is that almost every single optimistic rollup has committed to being a ZK rollup at some point in the near future, and they've got the path to actually make that be a case. But what they don't have, what the ZK rollups don't have, which the optimistic rollups currently have right now, are a huge amount of developers that have vested interest in making sure that their products work on these rollups. And so that transition, I think, will like carry a lot of that network effect, and the value of those rollups are fundamentally captured in those network effects. ZK rollups actually have to prove themselves above and beyond the optimistic rollups, because they need to generate those network effects. And so in my mind, I think ZK rollups have a timeline to launch in, and otherwise you're just another rollup.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, great last words. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and then, of course, leave feedback in the comments on what we can do better. This was an absolute blast. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you're as excited about superconductors and aliens and WorldCoin as we are. But with that, we will see you all in the next episode. Bye, everyone.